All right, welcome back everyone for another Silhouette Studio tutorial. A couple things before we get started. First, I want to apologize for the delay on this one. I have been beyond busy with birthdays, weddings, the 9 to 5 job, the side hustle job, and everything in between. So this has taken way longer than I would like. I said laser videos were coming next, but I put those on hold for the moment. They are still coming, but too many things on the plate at once. Enough on that for now, though. And the last thing before we get started is I'll try to keep it under control. And usually while I'm talking, it's not bad, but allergies today have been killing me. So I apologize in advance if there are a few sniffles during the video, just because I am fighting desperately all day against the runny nose and the runny eyes. So without anything else on that, let's jump into today's tutorial. And this one a bit different from normal. I get quite a few requests for how to design in Silhouette Studio, more than just our trace and our text and things that we've done before. I do a lot of this in Illustrator, but I do use Silhouette Studio and figured this was a good opportunity to show how that is done, or at least how I do it. And I got this idea for the video from a lady, Stephanie, in the Cameo Users Facebook group. She posted a question about copying an image. I will drag it over now so I'm not just talking blindly to you. This image here she posted to Facebook, and she asked how she would make this image, or at least something very close. She wants this without the text, is what she said. Specifically, she said, how does she separate the words from the image? Being that this is a picture, she said it was a PNG. I've just screenshotted from Facebook. But as a PNG image, it is that, an image, and you are unable to remove the text because it is not a layer, but in fact part of the full image. So you could do some interesting stuff with tracing and get a portion of it that way. But obviously this is part of the image, so even if you came in with like your eraser and tried to remove the text, there's nothing under it, no bricks or border to be displayed, so it takes a little more editing than that. So what I'm going to do, you could, like I say, trace portions of this. We could use our trace tool. If I can find my mouse here. There we go. And you could trace, like we've done before, maybe a portion of it, and use this as like the top half and edit the bottom, or however you want to do it. But I'll show you from scratch kind of how I would approach this project. So a couple things to note. Let's undo my scribbles on the photo there. And undo one too many times. So we've got a couple things to look at for how we're going to approach a project. I usually like to look at it first and get kind of an order of operations to the task. So we can see a few things right off the bat. And then we have obviously the state silhouette or outline here, this one being Arizona. And then we have kind of an offset of that around the full image. So you can see it's kind of this invisible line that's cut these rays, it's cut the bricks, giving us this black border. And we've got some kind of white or light gray rays. We've got our brick design, and then the trowel in the middle. So what I'm going to do first is create our state as kind of our main design. Zoom in just a little bit. And I just went to Google and found myself just a basic silhouette of the state. This one's not quite the same shape as the one in her photo, with this one being rounded at the bottom. I just grabbed the first one that was a clear image. So if this wasn't quite accurate and you wanted this shape, just look for one that's more appropriate to what you're after. And obviously it doesn't have to be a state or anything else. This is just how I would approach a similar project. So we have our basic shape to start. You could also go in if you wanted with this tool here, and you could manually draw out your shape. Depending on what it is, there may not be a silhouette starting point available on the internet, so you could do that as well. But I've got one, so I'm going to take advantage and trace it like we have in the past. And we'll bring our scale down like always, pump the threshold up pretty high because it's all one color, and give ourselves a trace. Let's delete our reference. And it's black in the photo, so I'll make it black to start. And I'll get rid of our trace line just so it's not distracting. So now we have our main outside line. Again, it's not quite the same shape, but it'll work for the example. And then, like I said, from here, we've got this offset piece. And then we've got a couple of layers. The bricks look pretty quick and easy, so I'm actually going to do the bricks next myself, since these are all editable pieces, if that's a word. They can be edited. I'm going to be able to design, and I can always move them, change layer height, put bricks in front of or behind things. So the order doesn't ultimately matter, minus the cut that we're going to do at the end. Or I'll show you a workaround where you don't have to wait till the end if you don't want to. But I'm going to do the bricks next as a personal preference. So I'm going to get a rectangle. And these are kind of random sizes, it looks like. They look... No, I guess they're the same size. They just have these ones shortened. They've cut them off early, and then the trowel is blocking the seam between these two. So other than the top row, these appear to be all the same size. I'm going to make them twice as wide as they are tall. Obviously, whatever design or style you're looking for. And again, you could use your reference image to get it kind of to scale or the same ratios. You can see it's scaling equally. This rectangle that I've just sketched is not the proper scale, but I could stretch it out this way and get it the same dimensions as the image as far as side versus top, which looks like it's about half, again, the thickness, roughly 0.6 by roughly 0.8. So you could do something like that. Obviously, this state and that state are not the same size, but it gives us a starting point. So let's just go with this one. And we want to create that brick effect. So what I'm going to do is start off of the state to make sure we get bricks over the entire thing. We'll select that one. If you hold Control and press a direction on your keyboard, like we've talked about in previous videos, it will copy one in that direction. So I'm going to push Control and right, and it's put it directly so that that middle line is touching. They're in the exact same spot. And I'm going to hold Shift and push right to kick a little space between them. And now this part's kind of important, is wherever you are as far as how zoomed in on the page, you want to remain through all of your bricks. Because if I zoom in and I do the same thing where I choose the brick, I Control over and Shift over, this space and this space will not match because I've zoomed in. It's based on how close you are to the image. So if I zoom out and do one like this and zoom in and do the same technique, these aren't going to be the same. You can come in later and choose the space evenly option here, and it'll move them to be evenly spaced. So you can do that after the fact, or just pick a distance from your piece that's easy to work and do it all without zooming in or out. Either or. I'm going to keep it at the same distance though, because I find that easier for work speed. So we'll just Control right, Shift right, Control right, Shift right. Create ourselves a row with that pattern of Control right and Shift right. You could also go right to left, up to down, whatever works for you. But once we've got ourselves a full row, I'm going to drag select all of that and unselect our silhouette. So we have the whole row of bricks and Control down. And again, we haven't zoomed in or out, so our spacing is going to be the same if we Shift down. And now this row of bricks and this row of bricks are exactly the same distance for our grout that would be in between. So again, I'll select this row since I've deselected it so it's easier to see. And I'm just going to hold Shift and move this until they look centered, which they don't. So we're going to eyeball it a little bit without holding Shift to bring it back. And then copy that row down, Shift down, and move it back over so we're in line with the first row. And Control down, Shift down. Oops, I pushed the wrong button. I apologize. Getting carried away. Get it in the middle, Control down, Shift down, and move it. You can move left or right, just depends on how much space you have to make sure you're covering the entire state in this specific design. So we'll call that good enough. I'm not going to print this or cut it or anything. So as long as it's close, but you can make sure these are perfectly centered if you wanted. And I recommend it for a brick design or it'll look wrong. So now we've got our state and our series of bricks. Let's give the bricks some color just so they match. And you can do it a couple ways. You can choose from your color selector here. You can choose from your color selector here, or you've got the same colors as up here in the first place. Or you can use your eyedropper and reference the color from the original photo. And you can see the box below shows the color sample, and there's a little bit of a gradient. Looks like she took a picture of her computer screen. So we've got a darker gray here versus a lighter blue gray here. So kind of pick whatever looks good, or choose a color specifically for your project. I'm just going to grab a random one, because again, I'm not planning on printing this. And I'll get rid of our outline, just so again, it's less distracting. And now we have our bricks on the background, and you can see by putting the bricks on top, the black grout lines are kind of automatically created for us. And then from there, like I said, you can either leave everything until the end and do your offset to cut all this extra off, or you can do it as you go. And maybe for the tutorial, just so it's clean and less distracting, I'll do the offset, cut this, and keep going, just so we don't have all this extra fluff in the way. So what I'm going to do is select the state like I've done here, choose our offset, and you can see here that the offset we're creating is inside of our original shape. We want to cut at where this line is here. So we want to take our state and choose internal offset. And you can see our red line. I did some playing before I started recording the video and found roughly what this distance is. And I found it to be about 0.15 inches. But if you haven't found out what works, and like mine started at 0.5 from the last project I was on, you can see this is far too big. I think I switched it to 0.2. I was close, decided I wanted a little bit smaller, and went to 0.15. And I'm just clicking off of the box to update the preview. And once you get a size you like, hit apply. And now we have our offset line here, which we will use to cut all of the extra. One thing to be careful of, which I mentioned in my tracing and offset video, but if you didn't see it or forgot, our red line currently is going under the bricks. And when we're cutting using the Modify tab here, you want, like a cookie cutter, your cookie cutter goes on top of the cookie dough. Whatever you're cutting with needs to be the top layer. So right now, this offset is our kind of our cookie cutter, but it's below the dough that we're cutting. So we want to make sure we move the line to the top. So now you can see that our offset state is now above the bricks. That's very important, especially depending on what you choose. Subtract specifically, it will make a mess if you have it backwards, because it'll try to cut your bricks out of your offset and make a big mess. So I'm trying to make a habit of putting it on top. And then I always like to make a copy, again, with control and a direction. And again, don't zoom in or out, because we're going to control and pop it back in a second. And we're going to select, I'll just select everything, drag it across, and then deselect the two we don't need. So we have the offset selected and every single one of the bricks. I've just deselected this extra offset as a backup and the black actual silhouette of the state. And from there, excuse me, we want to use this line to cut off the excess. So that looks like, from this little preview picture here, looks like crop. So we can try crop. And you'll see that has done exactly what we wanted, in that it has cut all the excess off of the bricks, giving us this little black outline that we see on this side. Again, our state's not quite the same shape. This one appears to have a little more detail than this one, but it's also rounded at the bottom versus this one being pointier. So, but it still gives us the effect that we're going for between the two images. And then we can select our offset and control left to put it back into its position. That way we can use it again moving forward. And by not zooming in or out, it ensures nothing has moved, and it has snapped it back to the exact same location that it was before. All right, we've got our bricks. Let's do this sun ray effect. A couple ways you can do this. I'm trying to do it all with the basic Silhouette Studio. You can see here at the top I have the business edition, so I have all the features. So I could do our shapes tab and like choose a special shape and get closer to this right off the bat. But I'm trying, because I've had some, I won't say complaints, but some critiques in previous videos that I've released, that the tutorials I'm showing, not everyone can take advantage of, which is kind of the truth with almost any tutorial, at least with something like this. I mean, obviously, if it's like how to remove shoelaces, it's kind of the same all the time. But with something like this, you've got different versions of software, different features, different versions, for like 4.6 versus 4.4. You might have different options between the two. But I'm trying to incorporate more free features and not using things like the warp tools and stuff that not everyone has. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but I think for this one we can get by completely for the free version of the software. So I'm going to use the basic shape or drawing tools and avoid the paid version. So using this guy here, we've got a couple things we can do. We can just draw ourselves vaguely that shape, something like that. And we don't care what it looks like up here. It's all outside of the state. We're just going to cut into this space. So you could do something like that, just roughly draw it. If you don't want an exact copy of this and just being close is good enough, then that might be all you need right there. I mean, you're done. You could do like we did with the brick. You could put it over this one and tweak positions and angles and get it as close as you can to the right degree and bring it back over again, something like that. So it's almost, if not exactly the same as our reference photo, something like this. And then from here, obviously, we need to rotate the shape. So we have roughly the same wedge. Looks like this one's a bit bigger, but it might just be going higher up into the wedge shape. But other than this one, they appear to be all close to the same. This one appears to be the thinnest, this one the thickest, and everything else more or less the same. But we'll just use the same shape and see how that looks. So select your shape. And I don't think we've talked about it up to this point, but if you choose our transform tab here, it looks the same as the transform here at the top, but the feature is missing from this drop down. You have to go up to here, and there is this rotate tab. I haven't checked the list. I'm hoping this is in the free version. I haven't actually checked the Silhouette Studio, like what's included feature for transform. If this isn't an option, not the end of the world. You can choose the line tool, do this array, and you can choose, when you draw a line, you can see it here, like right here in the middle. There is, I'm trying to like, instinctively want to point with my finger, that doesn't work. But here in the middle, where my cursor is, it tells you what degree you're drawing. And so you can pick a degree and get close, something like that. And then you can use the normal rotate here at the top, this green circle, to rotate. So you can use this as a reference. You can obviously move it closer, but you can pick your degrees and rotate it manually. So make a copy, rotate, make a copy, rotate kind of deal. So that's an option if for some reason this isn't in the free version and that's all you have. But if this is an option or you have an upgraded version, this rotate tab here that we have not talked about in previous videos is very handy for certain things. You've got preset ones in 45-degree increments in both directions, positive and negative. So you can go to the left or to the right. Or you can see there's a custom option here with a little drag option. Or you can see the numbers on the right here are adjusting. You can either tap up and down with the arrows, or you can pick a degree like 30 and have that be applied. So I'm going to select our shape. It should. It's not going to cooperate now that I've messed with it so much. Usually it'll show me a little preview. Let me make a clone real quick in case I mess it up. Let's try 15. Let's just do apply. There we go. Okay. So I want to leave this one in the middle alone, though. So we'll take the copied one and try 15. And if I line up my points in the middle, and I've got the snap to grid on, you can see at that bottom corner that I get the vertical and horizontal lines as they line up, sort of. It's lining up with the bricks at the moment. But you can get it honed in, get it real close. You can always go in and zoom in later and make sure all the points touch as well. Plus, they'll be hidden behind the trowel, so we don't have to be perfect. But you can see that looks pretty close. So I don't think 15 degrees is enough. So let's do 15 again. So now we're at 30 degree, and let's see how 30 degrees looks. Now we're a little wide. So usually the standard in between is about 22 degrees. So let's go 22 on this one. Let's do each rotation at 22 degrees. And we'll copy that one. Again, Control right, 22, apply. We'll get it close. Control right, 22, apply. We've got our middle one is the white gray color, white or light gray. So we want to make sure we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm already at 4, and their last one is horizontal. So I am not opening up enough, which might be why this one is so wide, is they did what I just did, made 4 and went, we want 4 to be it. Otherwise, you could do a fifth, and now you're at 90 degrees, and you could cut that straight like they have. But if, again, you're trying to get exactly this, then 5 isn't what we're going for. So let's actually, even though I said we're doing 22, let's go a little more. Let's go back to that 30. It's going to look a little big, I think, but oops, my mistake. I forgot to copy it first. 30 degrees, 30 degrees, and 30 degrees, because 30, 30, and 30 is 90, which gets us to that horizontal. Let's line up our points and see kind of what we're looking like. This one's a hard one. It's snapping really aggressively, so you can get close and then select it and use your mouse keys to fine-tune the position. And so we can come back and cut this one straight, or we could fake it a little bit since this one's kind of a small wedge and ours is really big. You could take this and go negative maybe 5 and snap it back just a little bit so it's not quite so aggressive. And now we're already close to horizontal. I might even go a couple more so we don't have to cut it. Let's go -2. Oops, not 52. That'd be no good. -2. Our bottom line is flat and horizontal to the bricks. That looks pretty good. And now we want that same thing on the left side. You can go back and go 30, 30, 30 again. Or you can just select these ones. Control left to get it on the correct side. And right click to choose flip horizontally. And that mirrored them to the other side. So assuming they're mirrored, they appear to be. If not, they're very close. So mirrored, we're looking pretty good. And we can select each of these with shift and click like usual. And we have kind of that light gray color. Maybe I'll pick this light gray color. And I'll turn off again our outline so it's not quite so distracting with the red around everything. I'm just leaving the red outline on our offset just so I don't lose it, because it'll be invisible on black and it'll just disappear. It'll still be there and you can like click around and find it, but it's easier just to keep it visible. So now that we have this shape or series of shapes, we can again cut it with our offset line the same way that we did the bricks. And again, we'll call it our cookie cutter is below what we're cutting, which is no good. So we want to bring our offset little cookie cutter to the front using this button here. And now you'll see it's on top of all those little sunburst pieces. Again, it's going to do strange things depending on which version of Modify you choose. So I always make a clone of my offset line just so I can put it back if it does get deleted in. I know with Subtract specifically, it deletes it every time. Other ones do sometimes, they don't sometimes. So like Divide, it creates new lines between them. So you end up with basically this offset again. So depending on which version, but I always make a copy. If I don't need it, I can delete it. So I push it off to the side, select my offset, select each of my little sun rays. And again, with this one, we want to cut into those. We could try crop. We could try divide. You can kind of play around and see what works. Divide's going to cut them, and then you'd have these outside pieces that could be deleted. I'm going to go with crop first and see what that does for me. And it does what I needed, so that's perfect. I thought so, but I'm still weld and subtract. I'm confident in every single time, and divide does pretty much what I expect every time. But sometimes the intersect and the crop, intersect seems to be the most, we'll call it random, where it does what it's supposed to, but sometimes it's a little unpredictable. And then crop is not too bad. So it worked out exactly like we needed this time. And then we can put our offset back by just copying that back over. And so now we've got our sky, and you can see again, our sizes aren't quite right. So depending on how much you wanted to clone this, plus part of the problem is our new state and the old state aren't even the same dimensions. So it's kind of up to what you want. Then I cloned this middle angle and then used that as a reference despite the fact that we're not this scale. So depending on your project and how precise you need to be, just be careful in your design, but this is how I would approach this kind of design. So this is looking pretty good. And now we have our trowel left to do, which is probably where most people would get super intimidated. But I usually just break it down like how they teach art classes, be it TikTok or in an actual school or whatever, and they usually draw basic shapes. So triangles, circles, rectangles. Break it down into what you see. I'm going to move all of this. I'll just select it all, move it over a little bit so we can work in this area. I like not zooming in and out if I don't have to, because I do so much of the shift clicking and stuff where space is important. But just move it off to the side. So we're going to create this little trowel shape, and the first thing I see is kind of an elongated oval for this handle portion, the silver piece, the brown piece, and this silver piece again. Again, I'm trying to keep it to these basic tools versus getting into the fancy stuff, because I like this oval better, but not everyone has that one available, but everyone should have this one. And we can drag that down and get kind of the scale or shape that we're seeing over here. And you can always manipulate it later if you decide you've drawn this and you think it's a little narrower or a little shorter or longer, whatever. You can manipulate it as needed, or you can just scale the whole thing like normal. So we're going to get it. That's close enough for now. We can always tweak it later if we need to. I'm going to do just a tiny bit more. And then we've got 3 sections, or 3 colors, I guess, more importantly. If you're going to do like a print and cut design, obviously the colors need to be the way that they're wanted. So we need this silver piece, and then a brown in the middle. So we want to cut this up, which is where that divide comes in handy. And you can see in the low preview, there's a line cut through the circle and the rectangle, which is exactly what we're going to want if we want to cut a line through each of these. You can use the knife tool like I've taught before. I don't like it as much, but it works great. It works. There's no problem with it. You just take it, drag it across. I think you can shift click. Yeah, shift so it locks the horizon so it's level. And then that will have a separate piece, but you don't have that flat bottom, which is part of why I don't like the knife tool. It physically cuts it and leaves it as is. The divide is going to cut the shape. So what we want to do is create our line through each piece. You can do it as a straight line, just draw a line across. Or I usually like to do it all at once, and I'll do this shape here. I'll decide where I want my cut up on this side. I'm going to go about here, and shift will lock it. If you don't shift, you have to make sure you're nice and straight. So shift, then you have a little bit of flexibility and it keeps it level. You can see here as I move the mouse up and down, it stays level. If you go too far, it'll go to 45 degrees, but you've got some flexibility, will cover your user error. So just want to cut across. To where we go from here doesn't really matter. Just going to go out and around. And then we're going to finish at this point. So I'm going to go past the shape and cut back across so I can finish this shape. Again, this outside shape doesn't matter. It's all going to disappear in just a second, and this will make a lot more sense. And to me, that looks a little high, but I can always shrink this later. So let's drag that across to make a cut and finish our shape. I know this looks ridiculous at the moment, but that's okay. And we've drawn this shape last, so it's on top. But when you're doing any kind of cutting, it never hurts to just make sure and bring this to the top, because we're going to cut on top of the oval. So we have this shape. We've verified it's on top, and shift-click the oval and do divide. And you can see all that changed is it added 2 new gray boxes. That's everything that's selected. So if we click off of it and move this aside, that reference photo or that reference piece, we can delete that. That's not what it's supposed to. Now these are 3 separate pieces, and each one has its line. So now we can add color individually to each piece of the handle. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. I want a good brown color. That's good enough for now. It's not a great color. I don't like it. It's good enough for this tutorial, but I don't like it. I'm going to go... Doesn't ultimately matter, but I like that brown better. We're going with that. It's good enough. So we've got our brown color, and let's put our kind of silvery gray color down here again. And you could reference, again, the gray or the silver from the picture, or you can fine-tune like I was doing here with, if maybe that's a red. I actually like that color better. So we'll go with that one, and we'll take that one. And again, I'll turn off the red lines because I find them incredibly distracting. So we have this. And you can see now that I've cut this shape. The top looks decent. We won't worry about the fact that it's flatter at the top at the moment. But our bottom, this one's like a half circle, and ours is this elongated mess. But now it's its own piece, so we can manipulate the shape as we need. So we can make it more rounded. That actually looks a little too short. It kind of created a point. So I'm going to bring it back just a little bit. So it's not quite so pointy. And that's good enough for me. And now we've got our handle, and then we've got kind of this point coming into the trowel, and then our main trowel shape, which looks like, to me, either a warped rectangle or a triangle next to a triangle, basically, where this point goes up the middle, just being where the two triangles would meet, if that makes sense. So I'm going to draw that triangle. We'll create our shape. We'll pick a point. We'll come down, and again, if you hold Shift, it'll lock it to vertical, 45, or horizontal. So I want a vertical cut for our triangle shape. This looks like it's pretty much 45 degrees. So I'm going to hold Shift so it snaps to 45 and choose how wide we want that 45 to be. And it looks like, in comparison to the handle, it's roughly a handle thickness away. So if we're trying to replicate that, this measurement across here is kind of how far out it comes from that. From the edge of the handle, it comes out a handle. So from here, we want to come out this thickness. You can do that precisely by measuring this distance, or I'm just going to eyeball it, because again, I'm just showing you how I approach a project. And then bring it back to the middle. And now that I've drawn that with this width, this looks incredibly stumpy. So I'm going to take this and stretch it up so we're closer to the scale that's at. I think our angle here versus the one I just drew, this one looks steeper. So I'm going to bring this one straight down just so it's closer to that shape. It looks a little nicer. And then we can take this and Control left, right click, and flip it. And now we have our two triangles that touch. And it looks like that shape there. We're not centered to our shape, which we can easily fix. I've got snap-on, so you can see the blue line now goes right through the middle of our two triangles and the middle of the handle. So that is dead center there. And now we've got our handle, which to me looks like theirs is a lot longer. So while I'm seeing that, I'm going to stretch ours out a little bit. More like that. There we go. And then we have basically two steps left. We have this point in the middle that's branching off of this silver piece. And then we have a really thick, for some reason, offset. I'm not sure why it's so thick. All the other offsets on this trowel are like a thin black outline and this really thick outline in the sky. So if we can mimic that more or less. And we could add the little thin outline if we wanted as well. Again, depending on how precisely you need this to be. So I'm going to give this our color. Looks like it's a lighter color. So I have something on my desk. That was weird. This silver color here looks to be pretty similar to the silver color here. So I'm just going to use the color that I chose before, which I think was this one. Yes. And now that it has color, I can turn off the super distracting red lines. There we go. This red line is just the edge of my cut area, so that one's not really there. And we've got that now. We can see that this curved piece that didn't match, this is why it doesn't really matter, because it's going to all blend together. To go through all this trouble with adding colors and stuff, this would likely be a print and cut. So overlap like this does not matter at all. But we do have a little bit of a straighter edge, which we can add with this piece in the middle. So again, we can just draw ourselves a triangle shape. Something like, where does theirs cut off? It looks like it goes to where it meets here. So I'm going to come from the corner across and back again. And you can see that is not straight. So I'm going to double click to edit the points. I'm going to move this one down. Looks like this one's one below into the brown. So I'm going to bring that back up so we have a nice level straight line. I should have started there and got Shift and drug it across to get the straight line first, but it is what it is. It works out in the end. Give this our color. And then this one has that thin offset, which we can add right now while I have it selected. Offset. And we're still on the big offset from doing around the state. This one's not nearly as aggressive. So let's try like 0.05 and see what we're looking like. I'm going to go 0.1. Yeah, it's good enough for the tutorial. And now take a peek at our example. This one's got a nice point. We're currently at defaulted to the rounded edge. So here we've got a really soft rounded edge. I want the point. And then you can slide this up and down. And the higher you go, the pointier that point versus this one being completely cut off. So I drag it up to the top, get a nice sharp pointed edge, and we can apply that. And right now it's hanging off the edge, but that's okay because our black line goes around everything. So I'm going to select the brown, do our offset. Our last measurement is pre-selected, apply. Our bottom piece, offset, apply. So now all of this has the same thickness of offset, which we can shift and click all three and make it black like our reference image. I missed. You can see here at the bottom, I clicked on the silver. I did not click on the offset. So deselect that and our offset. And black. There we go. Now we're looking much better, but the red stupid lines are back on. Invisible. There we go. And you can always weld all those black pieces together if you want, because right now they are individual pieces. So if you know you're done tweaking with them, the weld option here, which is grayed out because I only have one selected. But if you chose all three, or two for that matter, you could weld them together so they all like misclicked. If you click on them correctly and weld them, then they'll be all one piece. But for now, I'll leave them as individuals. And then we've got that thick offset outline, whatever you want to call it, on the trowel, but only above the bricks, which is kind of strange. It looks like it's right at the point. So the point up is thick, and below the point is the standard thin black outline. So while I've got this one selected, and again, this is still two triangles, so we can select both, choose our offset, because we still have the same measurement we used down here, so all of our offsets are the same size. We can apply that, and again, make them black with no distracting line. So now the bottom portion is at least similar to the original image, and we need this top portion to be a lot thicker. So what I'm going to do is take this, I have a rounded top. You'd pick the pointed and slide it over. I'm going to leave it for now. I just showed you how to do it on this one, so we already learned. But it's rounded now. I'm going to take the offset I just made and make a copy. And I only want that point up for the thicker portion. So I'm going to cut off this bottom that we don't need. I'm running out of room. Let's move our reference over. We almost don't need it anymore. We're almost finished. Just like we did before cutting the brown portion, I'm going to drag across to shift click to go straight, and then it doesn't matter where you go down here, it's all being cut off. Just make sure we close the shape. You can see it's on top of the black, so we're going to cut successfully that black piece. Our modify tab here like before, and you can subtract and it'll just cut it, or you can divide and it'll cut it like we did this handle and you'll have the triangle left. I'm going to subtract because it's less work. And now we have our triangle, which you can see is exactly the same size as the offset, which doesn't really help us yet. I'm going to zoom out. I normally wouldn't, but I want more room so you can see. It's wider and taller, so I'm going to scale evenly, which I think that just bounced back down. Push it to the back so we can see. That looks pretty good. And then I'm just going to move it until it wants to snap. You see the blue line it's putting right here. It's snapping it to dead center right there. There it goes. And then move it down so that it meets with these points on the side. So that looks good enough to me to be close to that. If you want it to be bigger or more aggressive, whatever, you can go as big and crazy as you want. But I'm going to get roughly to the scale that's in that image, because it's pretty aggressive. Not really sure why, but that's the way whoever designed it did it, so we'll do that. And you can see now we've got that really thick offset and outline I keep mixing together that will meet at this kind of horizon line. So all of this now is way too big. Let's scale it all down and kind of see where we're looking here. And if we use this one as kind of a guide, it looks like the handle starts on the third brick down, and we're roughly halfway into the sky. So you can kind of see if we're in that ballpark, and we're not terribly far off. We're at the very bottom of the third brick, and we're a little ways above halfway in the sky. So we could still shrink this down a little bit. Plus, their top row of bricks is only about a half a brick high. I did a full brick in mine. So my bricks are actually a little further along than theirs are. So let's do that. Something like that looks all right. I'm going to select all this so we can get the red line that's in the middle of it to go away, because that's the edge of my paper. And we've got our little trowel. And now if you were going to print and cut this, you can see there's some shadows and details on the trowel that obviously ours is very flat at the moment. You can add all that as well. You can see, again, you want to break it down into shapes. This shape would be kind of difficult to draw, this like third of a circle and then straight lines coming off of it. But if you draw yourself a square or a rectangle and you run an oval through it, something like that, you want to get, it's a clean cut right to a point. So we want to get this guy right on the edge and right on the edge. That's pretty good on this side. And again, we want to cut the oval, or use the oval to cut the square. So we want to make sure that the oval, our little cookie cutter, is on top. Select both of those and subtract. And you can see now we have that shape. This right now is actually the same color as the trowel, so it'd be invisible. Let's make it darker as a shadow color. And we can scale it way down and rotate it as needed. Get it close. I'm going to zoom in for this part. Get it kind of scaled so that it looks... Whoops, I misclicked. My bad. Let's see. And it's not the perfect angle, but you can tweak it if need be. I'm going to get it the right angle first to match the shape of the trowel. So we're parallel to that offset line. That's looking pretty parallel to me. So let's get it kind of even left to right. Click out here so I can see. It looks like there's a decent amount on the left, the right, and the bottom edge. But you can see our angles are all wrong. So double click, get our edit points, and drag this over here. Oh, you can see this one, it made two in the corner where it cut them. So I'm going to delete this point. So I have just a single sharp corner. The same thing here, there's two dots. So drag this up here. And you got to be careful. This one's a good example because I used an oval. It uses a curve. So you want to make sure that right now it's swinging wide and crossing itself. So you want to use this to pull this back across. So you're not getting overlapping lines. It's not so important because these aren't cut lines. It would be a print and cut. But it's a good habit to get into, that you don't have intersecting lines, which is where people have complaints with things like fonts that don't work and they cut themselves out and do weird, bizarre things. So we'll kind of match that curve on this side. And that, for the sake of this tutorial, is looking about as good as I expect. And if you look here, they almost meet in the middle above the point. I'm above the point, about to the middle. So that's actually pretty close. Without looking at that, I'm actually rather impressed how close that is. Looks like my middle point is a little lower. You could pop that up if you wanted. You'd, again, just double click and just move this point up. But as far as the position of these 2 points, I think I'm pretty spot on. So we can select this, right click, and rotate it. Oops, I forgot to copy it first. Copy it first with your control and your arrow, and then flip it. And you can see I went beyond the center because they touch, and I'm not where I want to be here. So we can click on that and move it to where it needs to be. And we want to do minor adjustment so that these, again, don't overlap. We want them close because it looks pretty good, but we don't want interlocking or like crossed line, overlapping lines. That's the term I was looking for. Usually it'll give me, it's not giving me the horizontal lineup. Usually put the blue line across this way so I can tell them at exactly the same height. So I'll get it close. I'll zoom in so I can see. And if they don't line up, then you can click and you can do that, the keyboard arrows to fine tune. But it looks pretty good. Again, for this tutorial, it's definitely good. I don't need to be more precise than that. So we have our little shadow piece. And again, you can add all the shadows that you want. You could do them as highlights. Like there's kind of a highlight on the left side of the metal, this lighter gray silver color here. And it looks like a highlight in the middle of the handle, which to me doesn't make sense that the highlights on the left, the highlights on the left, the highlights not on the left. So this doesn't seem real, but it definitely gives it more depth than our very flat, boring handle at the moment. Because right now this trowel, minus those obnoxious red lines. And you can turn them off by default. I just forget. And they're handy when I'm not trying to do a video where they're distracting. But you can see now this is giving it a different effect. They're a little more blue in here. You could change up the color. You could reference the original image if you wanted to go real dark. They're definitely more blue in that photo, aren't they? I'm going to keep them as is, though. I kind of like them. Maybe I'll go one shade darker gray. There we go. They've got little triangles at the top. You could pull those down. It'd be the exact same thing as this, just not the curve in it. So I'm not going to do it again. But I'll do it very fast, very inaccurately. We'll just pull triangle back to the middle, clone it, mirror it. Oh, I clicked on the wrong thing. Click on the correct thing and mirror it. There we go. The dark gray color, the dark gray color, stupid red line. Turn off this stupid red line. Good enough. So you do something like that, obviously make it the correct angle, so it's... Actually, their angle's kind of wrong too, isn't it? That's actually pretty close. Theirs just seems to go gray, the gray shadow up into the corner. Wait, where did our thick offset go? This thick offset. I had it on the trowel, didn't I? Where'd it go? Well, I showed you how to do it. I don't know where it went. I probably moved everything and it went away. It's probably under this somewhere. I screwed up somewhere and moved it wrong. That's why grouping is handy. I've lost my offset. Yeah, I don't see it. I can always make it again, but we already did it in this tutorial. But you saw it, it was there, I promise. I'm going to go very sloppily, just so we have our finished image to show. Do this. I cut the bottom off again, I guess, huh? Just use the square, get it close enough. Cut the triangle with the square. Slap it back in there real fast. It'll be less perfect than it was, but it'll be perfect enough because I don't care about this design. Back. Good enough. All right, it's probably under the design somewhere. That's all right. Or I deleted it by accident somewhere along the lines. So we have our trowel, we have our shadows, those highlights, and then I think we are done. You do them exactly the same way as the shadow. Figure out what shape you need. The handle looks like mostly an oval, and the bottom and the top here are basically half of the shape. They have like a dark half and a light half. I can't tell if it's regular and a shadow or regular and a highlight, but either way, I have kind of a brighter color. Maybe that'll be the highlight side, and we'll make the dark side on the right. So we can do that a couple ways. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy our shape, move it off of our piece so I don't delete it like I did the offset, and I'm just going to cut it in half. Because like I said, in their little image, it appeared to be basically half and half. It's so weird how much difference it makes. This looks so much darker than this because this is on a dark background and this is on a white background. So when you design, that's something to keep in mind depending on the look you're going for. This looks way more gray, this looks way more white, but they're the exact same color. So I'm going to pop this up a couple levels of darkness. I think that's what's on the trowel. So let's go that one. And line it up so we have our shadow side. And you could make a rounded edge if you wanted, so it's more like it's wrapping a curved surface where it's kind of going off to the side a little bit. You can do that a couple ways. You could cut into it like we did with the oval. You can turn this one into a make curve, and it'll make this. That's actually not the one I wanted to curve. I want to curve this one. You can see the red line is where it's going, is between those two dots. So I'll make a curve on this one, and you can manipulate this one as needed. So we kind of get the curve and move this over here. It's a little aggressive on the curve for such a short handle. But just so it's not a flat, straight, boring line, now it's got a little bit of a curvature, like it's a rounded object, and a little less boring. It's hard to tell this is such a low-res photo. It's a screenshot of a photo of a screen, so but it looks to be pretty straight in theirs. Ours has a little more shape, a little more interest to it now. And same thing, this looks like a straight line down the middle to me, a bright half and a dark half. But we've got the triangle shape, they've got the triangle, and a division. So we could divide. It looks like it goes right across where the trowel meets the handle. There's a line across. So we could add a line right here. And then they have just this lower piece, not this main triangle with the highlight and shadow side. So maybe just for real quick, just to do it, I'll grab this point. I'm just using a rectangle. Just a little rectangle, which we can make black, and turn off the red line. Let's see what that looks like. It's a little thick, so I'll bring it down just a little bit. That's good enough for now. Just so it's separate like the original reference photo. I'm going to copy this over. I'm going to copy this over so I can cut it where it is. And again, the black is on top, very important, or it will not work. And we'll delete the piece we don't need. And then we're going to cut this one in half for our shadow side. Or you could do that oval. I'm going to do the oval way this way. I switched it to make curve last time. Let's do it as an oval. Create the same effect, but with a different technique. And we want to make this a lot less round. Just manipulate it as you need. We want to go kind of from the middle. So that's the middle of it there. You can see the blue line again like normal. And the amount of curve to not be a straight boring line, maybe about there. And then this side we want to cut off oh, I can't do it that way. Undo. We want to cut off this extra, but I can just delete or subtract this and delete the extra. So let's do that. This and this, subtract. It's still one piece. So I'm going to bring it off to the side and use my eraser. You can do it other ways too, but it's just quick and dirty. It works well. Use the eraser, drag this guy back over, which is the wrong color. Select it and change our color. Sorry, I'm working kind of fast because this is the same technique, just again. And snap it into the corner. And it doesn't go quite from the center like I wanted. So I'm just going to bring this over. Why does that look wrong? I don't know why it looks wrong. Minus the round or the square part, make it a curve. It's closer. I'm being too picky with it for the fact that this doesn't matter. There, that looks better. It's a little less square. All right, and then something like that. The only one we're missing is the one in the handle, which we have a light side and a dark side. This one's in the middle. You could put it in the middle. I'm going to put it more offside, more like it realistically kind of would be. Put it more off to one side, like we're going around dark. I actually do a layered one. Show you a different technique you could do. So let's do this and copy. Is it not on top? Oh, it's right on the black line. There it is. Make this one bigger. Put one on top of the other. We'll shrink it down just a little scooch there. Let's make this one. It's going all the way to the black. Let's bring it in just a hair so it doesn't touch the black line. But not that one. Color palettes. There we go. Nice. That is not a nice brown. A little darker. Where'd my other line go? There it is. Let's actually make this one the color I just used. And make this one darker, like it's the shadow more on the dark side of the design. So move that up a little bit. Don't like how much overlap there is. Make this so it meets the edge of that other shadow piece. Just kind of manipulating until you like the look. This isn't the way it was designed, so I have to play a little bit more than you normally would because I'm making it up as I go. When you're matching a reference, it's way faster. Something like that, and then zoom out and see what our design looks like. So we've got, and that worked out well, because just where the shadow line is on both my silver pieces is where the shadow starts on the handle. Happy accidents. All right, so something like that, and now you've got it separate. There's no font. We've got all of our sun ray pieces. We have our offset piece, which it looks like we're done with. I'm going to put it off to the side. I grabbed the wrong thing. I want the offset piece. Missed again. If you just zoom in and do it right, I'm trying to click from back here so we can get this out of the way and make sure we didn't miss anything. We've got all the rays. We've got our thick offset on the top of the trowel. We've got our shadow portions here on the top, which theirs go more to the top. We've got the shadows on the bottom. We've got this piece, which now that it's done, oh, I have the offsets on it though. I'm not going to fiddle with it. I was going to stretch it so it was pointier because mine's kind of fat and short and theirs is narrow and tall. But if I grabbed both, is it object I can grab? Shadow and this one, and alley-oop. It's more like that. Not super picky, just making it closer so we can see the final image. Close enough. Close enough. I kind of messed up the curve, but I just wanted to make that trowel shape closer to the original design. So it's tall and skinny. We've got the shadow, the highlight, shadow, highlight, shadow, highlight. All of our bricks. And it looks like it's a finished piece to me. And then you could always add the text if you wanted it. Like she said, separate in the post. You could take your fonts, write New Era, or maybe you wanted a different name. You liked this logo, but maybe they changed their name. Maybe now they're, Rogan's Masonry. You could put the new font over the top, just like you would any other font. So that is how I would create an image like this through all the steps. I know that was a lot to take in if you're fairly new to Silhouette, but you can do full-fledged design work without using a program like Illustrator. It is definitely possible to approach it like this. And again, I didn't even get into the premium features. The only thing that might have been more premium is the rotate tab, which I'm not sure if it is or isn't, but like everything else, you can rotate it right here. You just can't be quite as precise, where we did like 15 and 22 degrees. The closest you could get is to draw, say 22 degrees, and then come in with your shape, grab one side, grab your other side, and then go across. Now you have roughly that much rotation needed. And so when you have your shape, you would know that it needs to rotate this much. And so your next wedge would go right next to this. So it's a little more work if this isn't an option, but I want to say it is, but I didn't specifically check. I didn't think about that one. But you could get it so that you're at that correct degree, and this is your reference. You'd pull that one, and now you've created the same rotation that I did here with just a couple extra steps. So I'm pretty sure this is an option, but if not, if the folks with the free version can't do this, that is how I would do the exact same thing. Create whatever degree you want using this radius tool to get yourself a reference. This one being 22 degrees you can see here. And then that gives you this as a reference to get your edges. But otherwise, that's how to approach this. Add your text if you need, and then export your project. So if there's any questions, or if I rushed through a process of this too quickly that needs a little more explanation, please let me know. Otherwise, hopefully that was helpful. You learned something new, and I will see you in the next one.